Welcome to Radiant Health, how to create health from the inside out. I'm your host, Lori Waka, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. Hopefully you've been able to find a nice, comfortable place to sit back, relax, and take everything in. You never know, today might be the day you hear exactly what you need to hear. And I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Dr. Erika Gray. Dr. Gray is a UCSF trained pharmacist, educator, national speaker, and co founder and chief medical officer of Toolbox Genomics and My Toolbox Genomics, a digital platform that takes an individual's genetic test results and offers a virtual toolbox of information, user friendly lifestyle choices, and action plans to live the healthiest possible life. With almost 2 decades of experience in the world of functional medicine and a decade of experience in genomics and pharmacy, Dr. Gray is dedicated to helping practitioners and individuals understand the intersection of their unique genetics with the environment and how they can positively change their health trajectory. Thank you, Dr. Gray. Thank you so much for being with us today. I welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. I always like to start with asking, what does radiant health mean to you?
Radiant health is really that intersection of alignment with what are our priorities, what are our goals, and then what are we doing with that? Because I think a lot of us imagine radiance, we imagine tranquility. But when we're not executing on what we feel is right to us and what is our priority, then I think it's so much harder to achieve radiance. So it's being in alignment with what are your priorities and then delivering that to the world.
That is such a good point. It's like if we're not being true to ourselves, we we really can't be radiant inside, and therefore we're not radiating outside. Absolutely, I know I feel that when I'm not being true to myself today, because I of course know about or heard of genetics and DNA, but I know that you actually have I don't know if you'd call it a process or a system that can really help us understand who we are at that genetic level. So I would love for you to just go ahead and share with us about that.
Yeah. So as a little girl, my father is a civil engineer. And so he always used to take me along with him to job sites. And it was a lot of fun. And we got to have father-daughter time together. But always the first stop we had was we had to go to the city to get the blueprints so he could figure out where were the property lines, where were the building corners, sewer lines, etc. And it was the most boring part because sometimes he couldn't find the information he needed. And 6 hours later, there I am, 8 years old, I'm just bored to tears. And I said, can we please skip this step because this is really tedious? And he said, no, because if I don't have this information, the building or the roads or the sewers or anything I put in is literally going to be floating in air and I have nothing to tie it down to, and I have no instructions. And so it occurred to me that we had the same problem with our health. So we don't go to our city to get our blueprints. We just dive in and start making decisions about our body. But now we can actually test our DNA, and our DNA is our blueprint to who we are and what are the areas we need to focus on. Where do we need some additional support? Where are our superpowers? And really, it is just so important for us to have that. It's a reference guide. We're going to go back to it over and over again. And the beauty of it is that now DNA testing has become so affordable that truly anybody can obtain it. And what we do is we give you that, and we take all of those A's and C's and T's and G's, and we distill it down for you into a report that's the so what part. That's what everyone wants to know. That's what I wanted to know as a little girl. It's like, so what? Why do I care about being at the city? But it's the so what? Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to be aware of? And then what are the steps I'm going to be taking to make sure that I am living the most fulfilling and radiant life possible?
Wow, that's really incredible that we have access to this, and it's something like we always did, but now the technology has finally caught up, and we are able to look at so many different aspects. Like I have to share with you, I was amazed. Somebody I know recently sent a string or a strand of hair in to find out what she's allergic to. And that just amazed me that one strand of hair can tell you all of your allergies. Um, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Technology is, yeah, the technology is just amazing. And now we're taking things that used to be really for research purposes only and putting it into the hands of the consumer, which I think is so exciting. And and I think the important thing to remember is like your genes are not your destiny. I think some people get concerned about that. The genes that we're focused on, I mean, there are certain inherited DNA diseases or chromosome abnormalities, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking really about the chronic diseases, the things that you can change, that you have the power. And I think it's just a really important thing for people to remember that instead of you sitting there crossing your fingers and hoping you're not going to develop the diseases or the chronic conditions that you see with your parents and grandparents, you can actually really be much more proactive about it a lot earlier, because we know that these manifestations take years to develop. It's not something that just happens overnight. It's a 20, 30-year process, and it starts when we're in our 20s.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So you could definitely take the test, and it can show you what you might be predisposed to. So you can early on just start, like you said, being proactive to hopefully maybe preventing certain illnesses. Or is there a way to? Or is there probably some illnesses that maybe are not preventable, but we can know about them? Is that true?
So it's more of a, do you have do you have instructions in your body that is going to make you more susceptible, more likely to have these genes actually amplify what's going on in your environment? So we'll use my father as an example. So he has the gene for Alzheimer's. He's a carrier. He only has one of the variants.
Okay.
And what that means is that if he is living a lifestyle that has been shown to essentially amplify the gene, he's got a higher risk for accelerating that trajectory. In contrast, if he's not, and so for example, this gene, it's fascinating. They actually looked at postmortems. So they actually went in after people died and they looked at the brains, and they looked to see what were the differences in the amount of plaque that they had in their brains for people with the gene, so the APOE gene, who ate seafood, and the ones who had the gene and didn't eat seafood. And just the seafood, the omega-3s that are in there, made a difference, and they had less plaque, they had less inflammation. So that type of information is just, it's so powerful, because all it means, it's a dietary change that you just implement. You've got the information, so you're going to eat more oily fish. It's your sardines, the mackerel, the salmon, maybe some shellfish as well, and make sure that you're keeping your inflammation down. Now, is that 100% guarantee? No, it's not, because we know that Alzheimer's is a multifactorial, but it's things like that that you can start to control in your life. And I think that, kind of going back to the topic of your summit, when we feel lost or we feel like we're grasping at straws, especially in our health conditions, it's really difficult to be radiant, because there's so much stress and we're just constantly worried and agonizing about what could happen. Versus I really would like to say, yes, this is what could happen, but this is what we're working on preventing or working towards. And again, prevention, you always have to be a little bit mindful of that term. So I would say lessen as possible.
That makes sense. And then kind of like you said, I mean, and nothing really in life is guaranteed. So you don't want to believe that.
No guarantees, but there's a lot you can control or minimize.
And that's so, I mean, that gives us like so much hope, and it's so powerful, because we can really take control over our health. And even though there, may not be a guarantee that it will prevent something, but like you said, I mean, gosh, it just puts so much control back in our hands. And I completely agree. I think so much of us worry so much about what if this happens, or, could this happen? And we take so much of our time and our emotional well-being and put towards that. And if we could just minimize even one little aspect of that, like our physical health, that I think would make such a huge difference for us. um,
It really does, and especially for women, because not only do we think about ourselves, usually last, but we're always thinking about our immediate family, our husbands, our children, our partners, our extended family. A lot of times women are the caregivers for their parents as well. And we don't take care of ourselves, or we don't take a look at our personal blueprint to see, are we more prone to stress and anxiety? Because that can be incredibly powerful, because there are some people out there who you tell them, especially right now with the pandemic, you give them some information and they think the worst. And so it becomes, so the cortisol goes up and they're in a fight or flight, and some of that can go back to the genetics, like COMT. If you're a slow COMT metabolizer, you are more prone to catastrophizing, you're more prone to worrying. So, depending on how information is delivered or received for people, that's going to make a big difference in your own well being as well. So, it's just so important to know that information.
yes, I don't think I realized that because I know that we take things in differently and we put it back out differently. Some people make lemonade out of lemons, and some people, maybe don't quite do that. But I don't think I ever realized that is actually part of who we are, our part of our DNA. Is that how you would say it? Or
Absolutely. And what it is, that kind of like that default personality. It's the personality, or it's that reflex that we often don't realize we're doing. Often the people closest to us will call us out on it.
mhm.
And it's really interesting because when, for example, like if you have someone who's a fast COMT metabolizer, they tend to break down their dopamine and their epinephrine and norepinephrine much faster. So you put them into a more stressful situation, they actually don't mind it. In some cases, they might do better because they're getting that constant dopamine rush. But then you take them out of that situation. Now they're going to potentially look for other factors. So it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be addictive foods, it could be video games, anything to kind of help with that dopamine. And what I think is fascinating is that when we talk about dopamine, we talk about it in terms of addictive substances, but we don't talk about our own internal dopamine that we can create for ourselves. So, for example, like if you've cleaned up a room, you get a little dopamine rush, like, wow, it looks so good, it's beautiful. Creativity elicits the same thing for us. And how do so tapping into that, and again, understanding that genetics for me is just, it's really helpful in how I interact with my family, in different suggestions that I make. um, my husband and my son are slow, so I know if I just barrage them with information, or if my husband's working on something and I come in and bring other things to him, it's not going to work. He's going to get frustrated, he's going to snap at me, and I'm going to be the one who's hurt. He doesn't mean he doesn't intend to hurt me or anything like that, but that's just how his brain works. And so when you have that type of information, you have a lot more compassion, you have a lot more understanding. And I just jokingly say, you might save a marriage or two when you understand some people's genetics.
Yes, so I was going to ask you if it sounded like it affects your mental well-being, and just by talking about addictions, I think that answered my question. How powerful is that if you are somebody who struggles with addiction, like you could really learn a lot about kind of the different maybe behaviors or different ways that you can handle your addictions, and hopefully process through them, work through them. Is that right?
Yes. And It's more of that recognition, right? So if you know you tend toward this, then, and I think this is where now you can start to really dial into what are the little steps that you can take to improve that. And I think so much of it, we can't improve ourselves, we can't change until we actually have the information. Otherwise, it's just guesswork. And for a lot of people, the guesswork becomes frustrating. It becomes decision-making fatigue. It becomes a vicious cycle. And so people just say, forget it, it's too hard. And they drop back to that default personality.
Yep.
So when I work with patients, if somebody's a slow COMT, the amount of information I give them is really small. I'm going to say, we're going to work on this for 3 months. Here it is. We're going to work on these 3 things. If I have a fast COMT metabolizer, they're going to actually be frustrated if I only give them 3 things. They want to know everything. But then you have to stay on top of them. What are the little steps that you're going to take? What are we working on this week? So even though they like the big picture, you have to break them down almost even smaller so that they stay focused and on track.
Wow. That's just powerful in terms of how to teach people, how people learn, how to interact with people, intercommunication. So many different, so
many things. And that's just one gene, but it's again, it's a powerful gene because it's found in a lot of different tissues. It's found in the brain, it's found in our gut, it's found in our liver. That's where it plays a role with estrogen metabolism. So for women, it's a big deal, especially as you start getting into perimenopause or menopause, to ensure that you are metabolizing or breaking down your estrogens into the protective pathways as well.
Okay. And so as somebody who is in menopause, I realize how valuable that would be to, especially going into being perimenopausal is such a different, all the different hormonal fluctuations and the hot flashes and just the mood swings, everything, and just understanding that a little bit more and understanding, I suppose, what you are sort of predisposed to would be very helpful. And would it also, maybe I shouldn't assume, but would this also help somebody understand maybe that they might be predisposed to perhaps breast cancer?
So breast cancer is a little bit trickier because breast cancer, it could be a BRCA gene, it could be a nutrient deficiency put together, it could be impaired detox pathways. So, for example, our phase 1 and phase 2 isn't working well. It could be what happens at the hormone receptor sites, the home where the hormone actually docks, what happens there. So some people, when they have the estrogen it binds much stronger. And so when you have a real strong, a strong binding affinity is what it's called, the signal it sends into the nucleus of the cell is going to be more powerful. And so if you have that, and then you don't have enough progesterone, which comes in to counterbalance it, now you might start to get more symptoms of estrogen dominance. The perimenopause and menopause symptoms could be much stronger. And we can't forget that progesterone is the first thing that a woman loses. It gets eaten up with stress. It plummets, but our estrogen levels stay up higher. And so that's what leads to a lot of the side effects or the symptoms that we often experience with menopause and perimenopause. And so understanding what are some of the nutrients that you need, because again, your B vitamins are super, super important for estrogen metabolism, for helping you sleep. B6 itself, I think, is responsible for 130 different reactions. That's just one B vitamin.
That's
make the active form, your body's just a little bit behind the 8 ball and it needs some additional help. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just when you look at your multi, you're going to want to make sure you have P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, not the pyridoxine. which is the inactive form. The inactive form relies on your body to make it active. So it's having just those types of information. And again, when you're in your 20s, you're not going to look at your results through the lens of menopause or perimenopause. You're going to look at it from an athletic perspective, from a diet perspective, maybe sleep, depending. And then now if you get into your later 20s, now you're going to start thinking about childbearing. What is it that I need to do to maximize my ability to have a healthy pregnancy? And then postpartum. And again, the same genes are going to play a slightly different role depending on where you are in your health journey.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I imagine it would help with somebody who is having a hard time losing weight. Does it kind of explain a little bit about maybe
Yes.
what? Oh, go ahead.
So for example, like if you are more, when you eat carbs, do you turn them into sugar faster than somebody else? Well, there's a genetic control there. There's also microbiome, the gut bugs that we have also plays into it. Are you more prone to eat sweet things? I mean, I have it. Yes. Sweet things are definitely for a lot of people are my downfall. But then recognizing, is this a learned behavior or is this genetic with a learned behavior? It's very powerful because I know if anything is genetic in origin, I need to be so much more mindful because that's always going to be that undercurrent there that I need to pay attention to.
Wow, this is so good. I mean, it's so powerful, and I just love how it's so informative. It can really give us, like you said, that was a perfect analogy, a blueprint for your life, and no matter what age you're at. Because, like you said, I mean, now that I'm at menopause, I'll look at it differently than I would have in my 20s, but it is still going to be so beneficial for me to as I get older and as I get into to being a senior. And
absolutely. And you are never too old to take the test. We did it on my 90-year-old grandmother and found out she was lactose intolerant. So she has 2 genes. She can't digest lactose. And it was really cute because, of course, her first question was, well, does anyone else have this in the rest of the family? And we said, sorry, no. That doesn't mean that if you don't have the genes, you aren't sensitive to dairy, right? There's the casein, but this is, you don't make the enzyme to break down the lactose. That's what this means from a genetic perspective. And so it was interesting for her to correlate all of these sinus infections that she had back with the genetics. So yeah.
Wow, yeah.
So there's always something to be learned in that.
Yeah, you've got me thinking about my family members and like
or the gluten or how we respond to stress or blue light. And I think the other thing that I love about genetics is we compare. For that's just inherent, right? We look at what our siblings have done, we look at what our neighbor has done, and we apply that information to us and say, woe is me, it worked for them, why doesn't it work for us? And this is oftentimes why your foundation is different. You're just starting with a different deck of cards, and the way you're going to play them in life is different, even if you are very closely related to one another.
That's, I'm sure that's so helpful to like siblings and just who, like you said, play that comparison game. And it gives them permission to, really not be a victim, but just to understand maybe this is what I could have done differently and can move forward doing differently, which could make a huge difference for them in their life, or anyone in their life.
Absolutely. Because the classic one is, well, she went vegan, and so I'm going to go vegan. And the thing I always like to say is, check your genetics, see if it makes sense. Because if you've got all of these issues, you're not going to make enough active form of vitamin A. You have issues with your B vitamins. You don't make enough of the active form of folate. You have different genes that predispose you to being more susceptible to colds and flus. Going vegan could be actually really detrimental to your health because you're not going to get all those nutrients that you need from the really nutrient rich meats that are available.
Wow. And that's so true. Like we don't realize it. We think, oh, we'll go vegan, and we don't have no idea how it could really affect us. So this is so that brings me to I usually ask for, like, what would be an actionable step for our viewers. And I mean, to me, it sounds like we all should go out and get this test. So, but I'll let you answer that. What would be like the next step or an actionable step for our viewers to take to learn more about this?
Well, I mean, and I will say I'm biased because I've done it with my whole family, but it's getting a genetic test. And so if anyone has not done one, we do have one. We protect everybody's privacy. You get the results in an app. And what's really neat is, as we talked about earlier, so your DNA never changes, but the expression of it does. So we also offer another feature, which is called epigenetics, which we didn't talk about, but it is the layer up above your DNA. It has to do with methylation. And this is how your genes get turned on and off. And so we want this. It's a dynamic environment, depending on where we are in our life. But if our aging genes are more methylated, we're going to age much faster. So we can actually take a look at what is our biological age, our hearing age, our memory age, eye age, and inflammation. That changes. That is a score that you can affect and measure over time. So if that's something else that people are interested in, especially if you have anybody with a history of Alzheimer's, mild cognitive decline, dementia, or you're concerned about it for yourself, this is a really great tool because you can see, are you actually aging faster from a genetic perspective in these areas, or are you actually right in line with where you are with your chronological age, or are you younger? And that is a distinct possibility for people. So it's a really neat package that you can take a look at. And again, what I love is that you get the information in the app. Depending on what your goals are, you can actually go in and set your goals. So then the recommendations will be dynamic for you. And you can download the app. You can just go to, whether it's Android or Apple, go to the App Store, download My Toolbox Genomics, and just pick the demo version. You can go in there and play around and see what's available. And check it out, because there's a lot of information that you can glean for yourself, and just recognize you're going to look at this over and over again. So don't be overwhelmed. Pick the one area that's relevant to you, and that's what you focus on.
Oh, that's a really good point, because I can see how like I could get overwhelmed. But
yes.
this is so exciting, and I love that you can watch your progression over the years, because that's something that I'm very interested in as well, just because of my hearing and my eyesight. And so I would be very
Yes.
interested to find out what my biological age is. So
That's right.
this might be a good time to mention, I know that you've been so generous to offer a free gift to our viewers, or a gift to our viewers. Would you like to go ahead and share what that is now?
Yes, so they're in the show notes and also within the posting. So there'll be a link there for you to click on. You click on that link, you'll get 7% off of any one of the tests that I described. You can get the DNA and the epi together. You can get DNA alone, or you can just get the epigenetics. So if you've gotten a DNA test from another company and you just want the epigenetics, that's also available to you. And then I also do live streams, so twice a month, just to help people learn more about their genetics, some recent research. And you can sign up for that on mytoolboxgenomics.com. And next week is going, it's going to be March, sorry, I'm getting my dates mixed up. Was it March 19th? It's going to be all about inflammation. So what are the
Oh,
different things that play into that,
that's
and what are
what I
the
need.
genes that also play a role in inflammation? Yes.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that with our
Sure.
viewers. And I definitely am going to have those links in the email that goes out. So Thank you.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, and I'm going to look into that because I had to change my eating because of inflammation. I had no idea how eating affects your inflammation and therefore the pain. So anyhow, I'm very interested in that. Um, but I know we're getting close on time, so I just want to ask: is there anything else that you'd like to share before we go, or anything maybe I have forgotten to mention?
So our DNA is being bathed by environment all the time. And don't underestimate the food you put in your mouth, what you put onto your body, how you eat, drink, and sleep. Because even though it's easy to pass it off as a one-off that you just did it today, it does build on itself. And your body loves to keep you balanced. It really, really tries hard. So the more you can do to keep your body where it would like to be, the healthier and happier you are going to be in the now and in the future as well.
Ah, such good advice. So it's so true, so true. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the viewers for hanging out with us today. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.